Hello, my name is Tom Stapleton, Executive Director of the Wakefield Community Access Television Station. And today we have a person that we're going to talk to that has a lot to say. His name is Greg White. He's the Chief of Staff of the General Counsel for the Office of Consumer Affairs and Business Regulation for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Nice to see you, Greg.
Nice to see you as well, Tom.
Very
Thanks
good.
for having me.
That's great. It's quite all right. Nice to have you here. So I'm going to read just a little bit about Greg so everybody will know a little bit about him and he can go on from there. Greg White serves as the Chief of Staff and General Counsel for the Office of the Consumer Affairs and Business Regulation for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Greg is responsible for overseeing the legal departments at the Division of Banks, Division of Insurance, Division of Professional Licensure, and the Department of Telecommunications and Cable. In addition, Greg assists the Undersecretary in the development of coordination of public policy for OCABA and its constituent agencies. Well, now that's a mouthful.
It is. It is.
How did you get started in something like this?
Well, you know, a lot of people, Tom, when they hear consumer affairs, right away they think of the Attorney General's office. That's a big part of what the Attorney General's office is involved in. They have a consumer protection division, but we're our own separate entity with our own mandate, and we have a pretty broad mandate. We have 5 agencies and departments under our umbrella. We've recently expanded because we took over the Department of Public Safety from the Executive Office of Public Safety. And so that is basically enlarged our Division of Professional Licensure. So we have 5 agencies. We have the Division of Insurance, which is responsible for regulating healthcare, property insurance, as well as auto insurance, among other things. They are responsible for overseeing a $50 billion industry. They have 1,600 insurance companies that they interact with, and over 100,000 brokers, or what they refer to as producers. They also oversee the Board of Appeals. So if you're involved in an accident, as we talked about before the show, and you're 50% at fault, you're going to be surcharged. You can appeal that to the Board of Appeals. Last year we had over 30,000 appeals, and about 2/3 were vacated. So we're the only state in the country that provides for this, this remedy, if you will. We have the Division of Banks, which is responsible for overseeing over 200 state-chartered banks and credit unions with combined assets of over $400 billion. They also regulate what they call non-depository agencies or industry, which is, amongst other things, debt collectors, mortgage companies, as well as check cashing businesses. We have the Division of Professional Licensures, which basically licenses 530,000 professions in Massachusetts, from chiropractors to electricians to plumbers to veterinarians to accountants. As I said, they just took over the Division of Public Safety, or the Department of Public Safety, so now they oversee elevator inspectors, building inspectors, as well as amusement parks, the Mass Boxing Association or the Mass Athletic Association, nuclear power plants. They have a complaint process, so if you've been aggrieved by dealing with a member of this industry, you can file a complaint. Last year, they handled over 2,000. And basically, they license and renew licenses for all these various professions. We have the Department of Telecommunications and Cable, which we spoke about earlier. They are responsible for regulating the telecommunications and cable industry, basically landlines and basic cable. There are about 350 telecommunications companies in Massachusetts, 9 cable companies. They basically act as a conduit between the public and the industry. So if you have a complaint, they have a Consumer Protection Bureau. They can respond to that. And then lastly, we have the Division of Standards. And most people aren't familiar with that. They oversee weights and measures. But if you go and you pump your gas, you're going to see a seal next to it. That's either been put on by one of our state inspectors or a local inspector. So they oversee licensing gas stations, certifying gas pumps to make sure that what is being advertised is in fact going into your gas pump. They inspect fuel delivery trucks. They inspect price scanners, and we'll talk a little bit more about it when we talk about various forms of identity theft. But their biggest concern right now is basically the skimming devices that they're finding on.
I'd be interested to hear that. That's pretty.
It is
amazing, isn't it?
It is amazing how they're able to capture people's personal information. They also oversee auto body repair shops as well as hawkers and peddlers, show promoters, amongst other things. So they have a pretty broad mandate as well. In addition to that, the Office of Consumer Affairs and Business Regulation also has their own individual mandate. I know you have a few of the consumer issues up here, but our main focus is on the data breach. So if you have personal information of a Massachusetts resident, that information has been compromised, you're required to notify our office and the Attorney General's office the nature of the breach, how many Mass residents have been impacted by it, as well as the what you've done to rectify it. Last year we had 2,000 data breaches involving over 200,000 Massachusetts residents. And again, when we talk about identity theft, we can go a little bit more into that. We also oversee the do not call list along with the federal government. So if you're, when we talk about the various scams out there, that's not a bad thing to be on. However, people say to me, you know, I'm on the do not call list, I'm getting scammed and whatnot. If they're looking to commit fraud against you, they're not going to adhere to a do not call list. We are right. So we also oversee the lemon law arbitration program. So if you've been aggrieved by purchasing a new or used vehicle, you can apply to our program for arbitration. One of the most important programs that we oversee is the home improvement contracting program. As we talked about before the show, you know, for most part, their home is their biggest asset, and you can't even get the smallest job done without spending thousands of dollars. At the end of the day, you want to ensure that the individual that is performing that work is in fact registered with our office. There are about 27,000 contractors in Massachusetts, and again, as we talked about before the show, for the most part, if you're doing home improvement contracting, you're required to be registered. There's few exceptions like above ground pools or interior painting. By contracting with a registered contractor, not only does that ensure that the person is properly registered, but more importantly, it allows you, if you're aggrieved by the contract, to recoup up to $10,000 through our guaranteed fund. And last year, we paid out just under $400,000 to consumers in Massachusetts. But it requires that that individual is registered through our office. And we've spent quite a bit of time over the past 18 months revamping our compliance. We're working with local building inspectors. They're our front line of defense. We've asked them, before you issue a permit, that you make sure that they're properly registered and that they have their CSL, which is the construction supervisor license. In doing so, it ensures that the person is properly registered. We advise consumers not to pull the permit. If you're hiring a contractor, you should in fact have the contractor pull the permit. If you pull the permit, even if he's a registered contractor, even if the contract's in writing and there's various criteria that have to be met, you basically are barred from accessing the guarantee fund. So you want to, that should raise a red flag if your contractor is telling you to pull the permit.
Okay, because that's a good point, because The reason I think of it because a friend of mine just did that exactly. He went and he pulled his own permit.
Sure.
And of course everything has to be registered, licensed, and
Yep.
the electricians, plumbers, and everything like that. And I think the reason he did it is because the contractor said, yeah, why don't you pull a permit?
Sure.
We still have to pull permits for plumbing and licenses.
Sure.
But, so isn't that interesting? I didn't know that.
Yeah. You want to make sure that it's the contractor that pulls the
Because
permit.
that makes that person liable,
Yeah.
whatever.
And now we're working with the Division of Professional Licensors, and before they renew a CSL, or in fact they provide a CSL license, they are ensuring that the individual, if they're required to have an HIC, are in fact registered, and they will not renew or issue a license for a CSL without first confirming that.
Just to back up a little bit, you mentioned you paid out over $400,000.
Yes.
And is that something that's in the budget? Where does that money come from?
It comes through when you register as a home improvement contractor, you pay a one-time fee into the guarantee fund.
Okay.
So that is funded through the industry. And again, it's there to protect consumers out there. You know, hopefully you've done your
Due diligence.
due diligence. You know, but the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, most people get the referrals from a neighbor or a friend or a relative. And if they've done a good job, then in all likelihood they're going to just go with them. You know, for the most part, the contractors who are operating out there, the 27,000, they're legitimate, they're hardworking, they want to do the right thing. But like in any industry, you have your bad apples. We're working now with a local law enforcement in Springfield, in the Boston area. We had a woman who spent thousands of dollars to have her second floor renovated, and as part of the renovation, they took off the roof. The guy took a huge deposit, took the roof off, and then disappeared. This is last fall, so this winter she's been without a roof. You want to make sure that the individual is properly licensed, registered.
It's not funny.
Yeah, no, but
I'm sorry, I'm not laughing at it.
No, but it's astounding. It's astounding, and you know, at the end of the day, we maintain a list of contractors who have been disciplined. So if you have been aggrieved in dealing with a home improvement contractor, you can notify our office. We have attorneys that oversee the hearings, and they'll conduct a hearing, and at the conclusion of the hearing, they can do one of a number of things. They can either dismiss it, as there's no basis to that. They can fine the contractor, they can suspend the contractor's registration, or revoke it. You know, we advise consumers, just do, as you point out, do your due diligence.
It's really amazing when you think of it that how much. Well, I mean, the information you're giving me right now is new, and you know, a lot of people just aren't aware of what's available to them.
No.
And I'm sure this is what you're trying to do, to get the word out to people who are thinking about certain things. And this is just one area.
Exactly. And there's so many areas, as we talked about before the show. That's why, in addition to overseeing these various mandates, we also oversee a consumer hotline. So we have 4 co-ops from Northeastern that spend from January to June with us, and from July to December. They man the phones from 9 to 5. They take hundreds of calls a day, and as we advise or tell the public, they're not lawyers, they're not there to give legal advice, but they can answer basic questions, and if they're not in a position, they can direct you to the appropriate agency. If you're dealing with a foreclosure issue, that would be our division of banks, which assists consumers with foreclosures. If you're dealing with a licensing issue, they can direct you to the Division of Professional Licensor. And so they're manning the phones 5 days a week, and towards that end, it's a good segue into my next area, which is identity theft. Identity theft is something that everyone's concerned about, as you know. You know, I started my career as a prosecutor, and back in the day, identity theft consists of someone losing their wallet and information retrieving it. Now the individual doesn't even have to leave their home. They're halfway across the world. These skimming devices that we'll talk about in a moment, There's a group operating out of Eastern Europe that's involved in implanting these skimming devices. So there are certain things that, Tom, that the public can do to protect their personal information. The first thing is your password. You know, people are pretty loose and free with their password. You should protect their password, because at the end of the day, that gives someone access potentially to your personal information. We advise consumers to pick a password that can't be easily associated with them. Mix it up. Some digits, a couple of words that can't be associated with them, and change it periodically. There's a group operating out there that are involved in, I'm sure you've heard it, ransomware, where someone will click onto a site and there's malware in there. It's hitting the medical profession. Hospitals have been hit up with this ransomware. Local police departments. I was talking to a former colleague of mine whose department was hit with the ransomware, and basically they were told that they needed to pay $5,000 or they were going to delete all their files, all the police reports, everything that had to do with their investigations. And he brought in a personal consultant who said, yeah, I can, spend thousands of dollars. I'm not certain I'm going to be able to retrieve everything. And at the end of the day, he just paid the ransomware, So,
and they can't track these people at all.
No, they use
That's amazing.
They use PayPal. There was a woman in New York, a grandmother, who ended up being hit up with this ransomware, and they notified her that she had 3 days to pay $500, or they were going to delete all her information on her computer, all her photographs of her grandchildren and whatnot. So she spent 3 days trying to come up with the $500, and on the third day she notified them that she needed another 24 hours. Believe it or not, they had a bit of a heart. They gave her 24 hours to come up with the $500, and then she got her information back. But it's hitting individuals as well as a wide variety of businesses across the board. But cybersecurity and identity theft are very important. We just conducted 2 cybersecurity conferences. The last one was this past fall at the Federal Reserve. We had small and medium-sized banks, presidents, and credit unions come in and learn from the Secret Service and the FBI about how to protect your information. There are other ways besides changing your password, however. One of which is, you've heard of the term dumpster divers, where someone will basically go through your draft. People are amazing. They'll throw out old tax returns with their Social Security number, dates of birth, and whatnot. So we advise consumers to invest in a paper shredder. The last thing that has been a big concern for our agencies is these skimming devices. We're finding them on banks, in ATM machines, on price scanners, and gas pumps throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We were just out in Springfield, and we were told by one of our local inspectors that they had found 5 skimming devices within a mile radius of the site that we were doing the speaking on. And these skimming devices, in fact, I think you might have some. These skimming devices take a variety of different forms, but basically they're operated by means of a Bluetooth. So what they'll do is, in the dead of night, that's the skimming device right there.
Right there.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
As well as here. And so what they'll do in the dead of night, they'll blacken out the camera, and I was told by one of my inspectors the other day that they'll actually put in a dummy tape. So the machine's running. Once they've gone in, put the skimming device, closed it up, they'll take the tape out and put the other one back in. They'll put the skimming devices in. What that does, if you move along to the next example, well, that's an ATM. But what they'll do is, and they can actually put it on the outside where your credit card goes. You put your credit card in there, and it retrieves all your information from your credit card. Now they have a new skimming device that we just recently located, and it's a two-prong. The first one will capture your credit card information, and the second one will capture your keystrokes.
Well, let me see. No, this goes over.
That's
So something else.
No, that's one type of skimming device where they'll actually put a device over it, and the device is in there.
Oh, and the card goes in here.
Exactly.
I gotcha.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
and you're seeing that, and if you flip through a couple others, you're seeing that. Keep going. ATM machines.
Yeah.
They're actually putting a facade over the ATM. They're mounting cameras in various locations, so the skimming device is going to capture your credit card information. The camera is going to capture your PIN number. We have found them in ATM machines throughout Massachusetts. Recently, there was jail guard, if you would, who was attending a concert in Providence, and he went to an ATM machine to take out some money, and he noticed that the facade was a little ajar, so he pulled it back, and there was a skimming device in that. Now, we advise consumers not to do that. There's important forensic information. Notify the bank, notify the gas proprietor. They will contact the local law enforcement, who will contact the FBI and Secret Service. But you know, it's amazing how resilient they are. As soon as we find a way to deal with the issue, they come up with a way to avoid detection.
Now, bear with me here for a minute.
Sure.
This is a camera
Yep.
that somebody has put there.
Yep.
Is that right? Now, that's so obvious.
It is.
I mean, wouldn't a bank work?
Well, banks are there, but all you need is a small window. A small window of opportunity to get this information. They're inspecting them, you know, throughout the day. But you know, some of these machines are in remote areas. This cybersecurity conference that we had a year and a half ago, we had a member of the FBI from the Boston office, and he was talking about an investigation that they had been involved in upper state New York. It was a mom and pop outfit. They had placed these skimming devices on their machines up there. Back in the day when we were first locating these skimming devices, when we found them, we would notify the local law enforcement. They'd come out, conduct surveillance, and when they came to retrieve it, they were apprehended. Now they're using Bluetooth. So they had put these skimming devices in, sent it out to 30 countries worldwide with a caveat not to release it until a certain date and time, at which point they were given the green light, and millions of dollars were lost. And that's just one small mom and pop outfit in upper state New York. So they don't need a lot of time to get access. In addition to that, Tom, and I don't mean to be speaking fast, but I know you have a lot to cover. They're handheld devices that they'll use at malls, airports, as well as train stations. And what they'll do is they'll rub up against you, and they'll retrieve your credit card information from your wallet. Those protective sleeves protect your information. They also have come up with a way to gain access to your passport. Since 2007, there's a chip in your passport with all your personal information on it. What they'll do is rub up against it and download all that. So that's a protective sleeve to put your passport to protect your information.
Yeah.
So
where do you get these?
You can get them online, but that's for you. A little gift for you.
Holy mackerel.
Yeah. So it's again, it's amazing. And as I said, some of these people are operating halfway around the world, and we recently, in Norfolk County, they stopped a Volkswagen with Texas plates on it on a motor vehicle charge. They ended up towing the vehicle, and they found skimming devices in there that had been placed on gas pumps throughout Norfolk County.
Now, speaking of, I don't want to interrupt
No,
you, but
not at
speaking
all.
of gas pumps, I know that this is what I saw this slide. Can you talk a little bit about this one?
Sure. These are seals that are put on by either state inspector or the local inspector. We've, in the past, advised consumers just to be aware if that seal has been breached or it's been removed to notify the proprietor. We were just informed this past week that they have learned that these individuals who are putting these skimming devices have produced a counterfeit seal. So they're putting it over. It probably does, it doesn't look exactly, but people aren't that careful in terms of examining that. So, the reality is, someone said to me the other day, well, how can you protect your information? What can you do to ensure that you're never going to be a victim of identity theft? That's impossible, unless you're going to go back to the dark ages and use cash and not a computer. But that's not realistic. It's not a question of whether you or I are going to be a victim of identity theft or any of your viewers. It's just a question of when and how many times. And so you can take steps to protect your personal information. If, in fact, your information has been compromised, then you should notify the bank, have them cancel the credit card, put a freeze on your credit report, review your credit report at least once a year. By law, they're required to give you one free credit report. Recently, my wife and I were having some work done on our home, and we were talking to one of the contractors, and the woman said, oh, I recently went to finance my home, and I found that someone had obtained my personal information and had purchased a condominium in her name, had purchased a vehicle in her name. Now, she wouldn't have been aware of it but for the fact that they did a credit check and she got a credit report until they defaulted on the payments, and then they would come looking for her. So, you can take steps once the information, your personal information has been compromised, but it's not a question of whether it's going to happen, it's a question of when and how many times.
Is it better, change subject, but is it better to have a credit card or a debit card?
Well,
can you answer that?
Well, let me go even a step further. You've heard of the chip and pin. Okay. Most banks were required to have that in place. Now, gas pumps are required to have that in place, or there's a date certain in which they have to comply with it. Basically, what that does is it protects your information. So, as soon as we find a way to deal with these situations where these skimmers are going to come with a way to get around it. Chip and pin is one way to protect your information, and most credit cards are requiring that now. Lastly, if we have any time, I can...
Yeah, we got a couple of minutes.
Okay. Just about the various scams out there. Our students take hundreds of calls a day, and we get calls across the board. The bigger one out there that's been around from the dawn of ages is the IRS scam. And you would think everyone's heard about it, no one's being victimized by it, but they're preying on the elderly. I've gotten calls at work. I've gotten calls on my cell phone. Basically, they'll call and they'll say they're contacting, they're with the IRS, that you're subject to criminal prosecution unless you wire money to a certain thing. And believe it or not, people are still doing it. We have a group operating out of Seattle, Washington, and upper state New York that are harassing people. The grandparent scam, are you familiar with that?
No.
It's also called the grandmother scam. What they'll do is they will go on social media. They'll find out, for instance, that you have a niece or a grandson or granddaughter and studying abroad, and they'll contact and they'll say your niece or granddaughter or grandson has been detained. You need to wire money in order to have them released. The gentleman that I work with, mother-in-law, was a victim of that. She lives in Texas. Her grandson was studying in Atlanta, Georgia. She got a call. She then went down to the local place to get a money order or to have it wired. Was informed by the individual behind the counter that, ma'am, I'd like to take your money, but it's a scam. She left there, went to another one, and they took her money, and she was out $2,500. So. They're everywhere.
I have another to mention. I have heard of it, and obviously we are out of time.
Okay.
But I do want to say thank you very much. This is Greg White, Chief of Staff and General Counsel of the Office of Consumer Affairs and Business Regulation. Thank you so much for coming, and a wealth of information. We'll have to get you back here again.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me, Tom.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Welcome.